The first time I heard, "You're not my dad," it hit me like a door slamming in an empty house. Ethan, 12, stood with his jaw set tight, his eyes hard and cold as winter glass. Mia, 16, hovered behind him with her arms folded, trying to look older than her hurt. I was at the stove, burning dinner in a red brick rental on a quiet street where the mailman knew every dog by name. Smoke curled from the pan. I had tried to make a family meal, chicken, rice, and steamed broccoli, because their mom, Laura, said Ethan liked it. Turns out I had misread the situation. Again, I wasn't burning dinner anymore. I was burning through every wrong guess I'd made about what this family needed. "I know I'm not your dad," I said, clicking off the burner. "I'm David. I'll stay out of your way, but we all have to eat." Mia's chin lifted. "We ate at Mom's work," she said, her tone flat and final. Ethan glanced at the smoke alarm, which somehow stayed quiet, then back at me. For a second, I saw something softer in his eyes. It vanished. "Don't try so hard," he muttered. "It's weird." I nodded like the words didn't land, but they did, sliding under my ribs and staying there like splinters. Laura offered a sad smile from the doorway, a silent plea for the night to go easier than the day. Later, the house fell quiet. Doors clicked shut, pipes sighed, the fridge hummed its low tune. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed softly, as if someone were checking to see if I was still there. I was. I planned to be. And that was the one thread I held onto when everything else felt ready to snap. I'm not the guy who falls in love fast. I'm the guy who fixes buzzing refrigerators, rattling vents, and crooked fences. I run a small handyman business in Maple Grove. I keep my tools clean and my promises cleaner. I met Laura when her washing machine flooded the laundry room. The framed photos on her wall told a story before she ever spoke. A tall man with kind eyes, always in the frame. That was Mark, her late husband. When the washer coughed up another surge of water, she laughed, the tired kind of laugh people give when they've already cried enough. Small talk led to coffee. Coffee led to dinners, usually after Ethan's baseball practice and Mia's art club. I learned that Mia organized her stress into straight lines and perfect grades, while Ethan filled silences with jokes and big questions he pretended were small. I learned I liked listening. I liked the way Laura said her kids' names, and the way the chairs around the table seemed to move a little closer each week, as if the four of us were a space learning its own shape. But grief is a long hallway with closed doors. I knew I would never replace Mark. I didn't want to. I just wanted to stand beside his memory and help build something new without pushing the old things off the shelf. When I proposed to Laura on a quiet Sunday, she cried and said yes, squeezing my hand. "Promise me we'll go slow," she said. "Promise we'll stay kind, even on the hard days." "I promise," I said, and I meant it. The light coming through the kitchen window hit her ring just right, and for a second, everything in our messy world looked simple. What I didn't know then was that I hadn't just moved into a house. I'd walked into a territory with its own invisible borders. The past wasn't just a story, it was a map I didn't know how to read. The first week felt like holding my breath. I spent my time on small, uncontroversial projects, fixing a sticky lock on the back door, organizing the chaotic mess of tools in the garage, staying out of the way. One evening, Laura found me in the kitchen, staring at a row of hooks by the door. 3 of them had keys. One was empty. "That was Mark's," she said softly, joining me. "His workshop keys hung there. I just never had the heart to take it down." "Then it stays," I said right away. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Thank you. I know this isn't easy, David. It feels like I've asked you to learn a new language overnight." "I'm a slow learner, but I get there," I told her. "Just don't try to be him," she whispered. "Don't try to fill his space. Just find your own. The kids will see it eventually. They're good kids. They're just lost." She squeezed my arm, and in that small gesture, I felt both the weight of her hope and the depth of her fear. I wasn't just building a life with her. I was navigating the architecture of a life that was built before I arrived. The first big mistake was a small one. In the garage, I found a cardboard box labeled in thick marker, "Dad stuff. Do not touch." I didn't open it. I only moved it to a high shelf to protect it from a leaky bag of lawn fertilizer. That night, Mia went looking for it. When she didn't find it where she expected, her face went pale, then red. "You touched it," she accused. "I just moved it up," I answered carefully. "It's safer there." It was safe where it was. Her voice shook. That's not your call to make. I held up my hands in surrender. You're right. I should have asked. She stared at me like a judge waiting for a better defense. None came. She grabbed the box, wobbling under its weight. Ethan appeared behind her and steadied the other side. Together, they lowered it back to the oil-stained square of concrete where it had sat, a ceremony of precision and unspoken rules. It was a boundary I hadn't even seen. I had walked in with a toolbox and good intentions, completely unaware of the emotional landscape. You can walk into a house full of love and still trigger its alarms without meaning to. A few days later, I saw that landscape up close. I was heading downstairs when I heard a rustling sound from the recycling bin in the hall. Mia had just come from her room and disappeared into the kitchen. Inside the bin, lying on a bed of junk mail, lay the remains of a charcoal sketch. It was a portrait, and though it had been ripped into a dozen precise strips, I could still make out the face of a man with kind eyes, Mark. The detail was incredible. She had captured the way his smile seemed to start in his eyes. She hadn't just thrown it away, she had deliberately destroyed it. It was an act of frustration, or maybe grief, a protest against a talent that could so perfectly recreate what she had lost. I didn't say a word. I just pushed the torn pieces down under a newspaper, feeling like an intruder who had stumbled upon a private, painful ritual. It was another closed door, and I was learning that some doors you don't even knock on. Other cracks appeared. Mia's art teacher praised her portfolio, but at home, she tore new sketches into confetti, calling them nothing. Ethan, once a keen baseball player, now warmed the bench and acted like he didn't care. He did. One night, I complimented the chicken Mia had cooked. Best I've had this week, I said, smiling. Her fork paused. Ethan stared at his plate. Dad made better, Ethan whispered. Yeah, Mia added quietly. Dad knew us. I just nodded. I know. There was no defense to offer, but it still hurt. I went back to washing dishes that were already clean, reminding myself that pain isn't a signal to run. It's a sign that you care. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling and think the kind of thoughts you don't put on a greeting card. Who do you think you are? A fixer who wandered into a museum and started moving the exhibits? Is it worth it, being this patient when every kindness you offer lands wrong? Then I would roll onto my side and look at Laura asleep beside me, and the answer was always yes. But some mornings, that yes felt thin. I kept my promise, slow, kind, steady. I drove Ethan to practice and clapped even when he didn't look my way. I hung a shelf for Mia's sketchbooks with a note that said, Place of Honor. She moved the books back to her desk, leaving the shelf empty for 3 days in silent protest. The worst moment was small and sharp. I replaced the worn tire on Ethan's bike and tightened the chain, thinking he'd appreciate it. He didn't smile. Dad and I were going to do that together, he said, his eyes fixed on the ground. I can show you what I did. I offered. We can. No, he cut me off. You already did it. Later, I sat on the back steps and gave myself 5 minutes to be angry, a rule a therapist once gave me. Feel it, count it, let it go. Angry at fate, at this maze I was in, and at my own childish need for a thank you. 5 minutes, then I let it go. When I came back inside, a crumpled note sat on the counter in careful handwriting. Thank you for the tire, Ethan. I smoothed it flat and put it in my wallet. It was small, but it felt huge. That night, a door down the hall closed softly instead of slamming. Our first Real win came disguised as a Saturday flea market. With Laura at an early shift, I asked the kids if they wanted to go, bracing for a no. Maybe they'll have baseball cards, Ethan said with a theatrical shrug. I need charcoal sticks, Mia added, if they even sell them there. At the fairgrounds, I kept my hands in my pockets and mostly stayed quiet. I watched Ethan negotiate a deal on a small stack of cards, and the seller threw in a protective sleeve for free. A flash of joy crossed Ethan's face before he quickly tamped it down. Mia found a booth with old cameras and art supplies. She ran a finger over a scratched lens as the owner, a retired photographer, told her stories about light. He offered to show her how the camera worked if she promised to bring back prints. She gave him a nod that meant maybe. On the way to the car, Ethan asked if we could stop at the park. We tossed a baseball back and forth. He laughed once, then looked embarrassed by the sound. I didn't make a big deal of it. I just kept throwing. That night, Mia taped a small photo to the fridge, a picture of the market tents in soft sunlight, taken with the old camera. For Mom, she said. to show her we got out of the house. It's beautiful, I told her. She didn't answer, but she didn't take it down, either. It was a win, not a parade, not forgiveness, but something real. Then the next blow landed. The school called. The assistant principal's careful, measured voice. There was an incident. I found Ethan outside the office, shoulders slumped. Another kid had called him bench warmer one too many times. There was shoving, and though no one was hurt, there would be consequences. On the drive home, Ethan stared out the window. Don't tell Mom yet, he said. She's already tired. We'll tell her, I said, just not this second. When we pulled into the driveway, Mia was on the steps, arms crossed. Coach called, she said. So much for secrets. Laura's car rolled in behind us. She jumped out, her face etched with worry. Are you okay? She asked Ethan, reaching for him. He recoiled. I'm fine, he said too loudly. The evening unraveled quickly. Laura tried to comfort. Mia lectured, and Ethan yelled that she didn't know anything. I suggested we all take a breath. Stop pretending you know us. Mia snapped, her eyes wet with anger. You're not Dad. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they were new, but because this time, they were true in a way that felt final. The silence that followed was absolute. Laura flinched. Ethan kicked the porch rail and stormed inside, slamming the door. Mia ran to her room. Laura stood with a hand over her mouth, and I stared at the doorframe, feeling the promise I'd made to her begin to wobble. That night, the house was full of sharp edges. In the morning, I found the dad's stuff box in the garage wide open. Items were scattered, as if someone had reached inside for help and pulled out handfuls of grief. I leaned against the doorframe and closed my eyes. I could fix a broken hinge, but I had no idea how to fix a family. Before sunrise, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the box. I didn't touch anything. I just looked. A watch with a cracked leather band. A baseball program with a player's name circled. A Polaroid of two laughing kids in front of a Ferris wheel at County Days, with Mark grinning behind them. I didn't want to replace any of it. I just wanted to understand how to live beside it. Laura came in, her eyes puffy. She sat down and took my hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. They're hurting. They lash out at the safest person because they know you won't break. I can take it, I said, but I don't know what I'm doing. I keep trying to be useful. Maybe I need to be familiar instead. She told me about the small rituals Mark had created. He left goofy doodles in Mia's sketchbook and pep talks in Ethan's glove. He made pancakes shaped like their initials on hard mornings. I listened, and something clicked inside me, like a tool finding the right groove. What if we start a new box? I said, not to replace his, to sit next to it. I found a shoebox and wrote, Our Now, on a scrap of paper. I dropped in Ethan's crumpled note about the tire. I asked Mia if I could borrow the flea market photo, promising to give it back on request. She said yes. I added a grocery receipt with pancake mix circled. When the kids woke up, the house smelled like pancakes. 2 plates were waiting, with pancakes shaped like an M and an E. No speeches, just breakfast. My new strategy was quiet. I started leaving notes of my own. One in Ethan's glove, hard days happen. Still my favorite player to watch. One in Mia's sketchbook, a doodle of a camera with the words, Let's learn together? I asked Mia to show me the old camera. I didn't offer advice, I just asked what she liked about it. The blur around the edges, she said. It feels honest. I told her that made sense to me. For Ethan, I volunteered to help his team with equipment. I stood back, clapped for everyone, and only spoke when spoken to. One day, he reluctantly introduced me to the other boys. This is David, he said. He fixes chains. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was a start. The coach, a tired-looking guy named Henderson, overheard him. Does he fix bats too? Henderson asked, holding up a splintered wooden bat that was clearly a team favorite. The budget's shot, and the kids are broken up about this one. I can take a look, I said. I spent the rest of the practice in the dugout, carefully sanding the splintered wood, applying wood glue, and clamping it with a precision that was second nature to me. Ethan kept stealing glances over from the bench, a flicker of curiosity on his face. By the end of practice, the bat was solid again, not perfect, but usable. I handed it back to Henderson, who rapped it against the metal bench. It made a dull, solid thud. Hey, not bad at all, he said, loud enough for the team to hear. Thanks, David. Ethan didn't say anything to me, but as we walked to the car, I saw him look back at the dugout where the coach was showing another player the repair. He saw me as something other than his mom's boyfriend. He saw me as useful. It was a language he understood. A week later, on a rainy game day, I showed up with a thermos of hot chocolate. The boys called it bench fuel. The Our Now box slowly gathered artifacts. A ticket from a photo show where Mia displayed 2 prints. A game schedule with Ethan's name underlined. A smooth stone Laura found that looked like a heart. The ice was thinning, not because I pushed, but because I stayed. While clearing dinner one night, Mia said casually, "Mom told us about the box." "I'm not trying to replace anything," I assured her. She shrugged. "I know." She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed a fraction. For us, that was a breakthrough. Later, Ethan asked, "Is there room in the box for something dumb?" "There's room for everything," I said. He nodded, looking like he'd truly been heard. Spring rolled into summer, and county days returned. Laura suggested we go as a family. No one argued. We walked through the dusk. At the photo booth near the Ferris wheel, Mia stopped. "Dad took a picture of us here once," she said. "It faded. Want to make a new one?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. We all squeezed into the booth. The first shot was awkward. The second caught Ethan and me making the exact same sideways glance. In the third, Laura was fixing Mia's hair while Mia laughed. We stepped out with a strip of tiny photos and a feeling I couldn't yet name. Then Ethan tugged my sleeve and pointed to the Ferris wheel. "Can we get one there? Like the old one?" We handed Mia the old camera. She framed the shot, telling us where to stand. Laura slipped her arm through mine. Ethan stood on my other side. For one heartbeat, I felt the past and present align. Click. Back home, we placed the new Ferris wheel photo in the Our Now box, right beside the old Polaroid. No speeches were needed. Before bed, Ethan hovered at the kitchen door. "Hey," he said, "I don't mind the notes. In the glove. You can keep doing it." Then Mia leaned on the doorframe. "The gallery owner said my composition is good. Said whoever taught me to look for light did okay." "You taught yourself," I said. I just stood nearby. It was enough. Summer deepened. The house changed in small ways that added up. 2 bikes leaned together in the garage. The once empty shelf in Mia's room now held 3 framed prints. On the anniversary of Mark's passing, we set the table with care. Laura made his favorite pasta. We placed an item from his box in the center of the table, and beside it, the new photo from ours. We didn't rank the memories. We made room for both. After dinner, Mia read a poem she'd written. Ethan, red-faced, admitted he'd been scared of liking me, thinking it meant forgetting his dad. "It doesn't," I told him. "It just means your heart is making more space." He nodded, his eyes wet, and slid a baseball card across the table. It was the one from the flea market, now signed by a retired player. "For the box," he said. The next morning, Ethan asked me to show him how to change his bike chain. We knelt on the garage floor together. Later, Mia dragged me into the yard at golden hour. "Hold still," she ordered, focusing her lens. "You look like a dad." The words came out by accident. For a second, the air between us went still. She didn't take them back. I didn't make it heavy. The camera clicked. Another photo for a growing box. Our house still has a hallway light that needs 2 clicks to turn on, and the garden weeds still put up a fight. And when I look at the wall now, at the photo booth strip beside the Ferris wheel picture, I don't see what we lost. I see a family that didn't replace anything, just learned how to build more rooms inside the same heart. Thank you for listening.